The fluorescent lights hummed overhead like angry wasps as Maya Chen stared at her computer screen, the clock in the corner mocking her with its digital display. 11:47 p.m. The office around her buzzed with the exhausted energy of 20 other employees, all trapped in the same fluorescent-lit purgatory that had become their second home. Her phone buzzed. Another email from Richard Blackwood, their tyrannical director, sent from his home office where he was undoubtedly sipping expensive whiskey while his employees burned out under the relentless pressure he'd created. Team, I need the Morrison account projections by 6 a.m. No exceptions. Overtime is mandatory when we have deadlines to meet. Remember, we're a family here, and families make sacrifices. Maya's jaw clenched. Family. The word tasted bitter after 18 months of working for Blackwood Industries, a mid-sized consulting firm that had slowly transformed from a decent workplace into a corporate hellscape under Richard's leadership. Families didn't force their members to work 80-hour weeks. Families didn't threaten termination for requesting vacation time. Families didn't send passive-aggressive emails at midnight demanding impossible deadlines. She glanced around the office at her family. Jennifer from accounting had dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't hide anymore. Tom from marketing was literally asleep at his desk, his head pillowed on a stack of reports. Sarah from HR had quit last month after what she called a nervous breakdown, though everyone knew it was really just the breaking point that came from being Richard's enabler for too long. Maya's phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from her actual family, her younger sister Emma, a pre-med student at the local university. Still at work? You missed dinner again? Mom's worried about you. The knot in Maya's stomach tightened. She'd missed dinner with her family 4 times this week. She'd missed her nephew's birthday party last weekend. She'd missed her own life, sacrificed it on the altar of Richard Blackwood's impossible demands and sociopathic management style. But Maya Chen wasn't just any employee. She had a secret weapon that Richard didn't know about, a bachelor's degree in business administration with a minor in labor law, and a photographic memory that had gotten her through college with a 4.0 GPA. She'd been documenting everything, every email, every illegal demand, every violation of labor laws that Richard had committed in his quest to squeeze every drop of productivity from his workforce. She just hadn't known what to do with it all. Until now, another email pinged into her inbox. 11:52 p.m. Richard again. Maya, I noticed you haven't responded to my last email. I trust you're working on those projections. I shouldn't have to remind you that your performance review is coming up, and dedication to the company is a key metric we evaluate. Maya's fingers hovered over her keyboard. She could respond the way she always did, with a polite, "Of course, Mr. Blackwood," and another sleepless night scrambling to meet an impossible deadline. Or she could do something else entirely. She opened a new document and began typing. Not a response to Richard, but something much more important. A detailed timeline of every labor law violation, every illegal demand, every piece of evidence she'd been collecting for the past year and a half. Email timestamps, recorded conversations, legal in their state with one-party consent, photographs of the workplace conditions, documentation of unpaid overtime, evidence of retaliation against employees who complained. As she worked, Maya felt something she hadn't experienced in months: hope. Not the false hope of a weekend that would be interrupted by urgent emails, but real hope. The hope that came from having a plan. What do you think will happen next? Share your predictions in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more thrilling stories. Maya worked through the night, but for the first time in months, she wasn't working on Richard's impossible demands. She was building a case. By 3 a.m., she had compiled a comprehensive dossier that would make any labor attorney salivate. Dozens of emails sent outside business hours with demands for immediate responses, documentation of employees being forced to work off the clock, evidence of retaliation against workers who had requested time off, and a pattern of intimidation that went back over a year. Her computer chimed with another email. 3:17 a.m. Richard was apparently having trouble sleeping too. Maya, I've been thinking about the Morrison account. I want you to come in early tomorrow, and present your findings to the client at 8 a.m. Prepare for a hostile audience. Morrison's team is skeptical of our capabilities, and I'm counting on you to change their minds. Don't disappoint me. Maya screenshot the email and added it to her growing collection. She'd learned to capture everything because Richard had a habit of deleting emails that made him look bad, then claiming he'd never sent them. But Maya had them all, saved in multiple locations, backed up to the cloud, and organized by date and violation type. As dawn broke over the city, Maya made a decision that would change everything. She picked up her phone and dialed a number she'd researched weeks ago, but never had the courage to call. Department of Labor, Wage and Hour Division, a crisp voice answered. I'd like to file a complaint regarding systematic labor law violations at my workplace, Maya said, her voice steadier than she felt. I can help you with that. Can you provide me with your name and the name of your employer? Maya took a deep breath. My name is Maya Chen, and I work for Blackwood Industries. I have extensive documentation of violations that I believe you'll find very interesting. The intake process took over an hour. Maya provided dates, times, specific incidents, and promised to email the documentation she'd compiled. The investigator, a woman named Janet Morrison, no relation to the client, Maya noted with grim humor, seemed genuinely excited by the breadth of evidence Maya had gathered. Ms. Chen, in my 15 years with the Department of Labor, I've rarely seen such comprehensive documentation from a complainant. Your employer has made some serious mistakes, and you've done an excellent job preserving the evidence. We'll be opening a formal investigation immediately. Maya felt a thrill of satisfaction, but she wasn't done yet. Her next call was to the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. Richard's pattern of treating female employees differently than male ones was subtle but documented. Maya had kept careful records of how often women were asked to work late compared to men, how often they were given menial tasks regardless of their qualifications, and how often their complaints were dismissed or ignored. The EEOC investigator was equally impressed with Maya's documentation. We'll be coordinating with the Department of Labor on this, he told her. It sounds like your employer has multiple agencies worth of violations to answer for. By 7 a.m., Maya had filed complaints with 3 different agencies and had appointments scheduled with 2 employment attorneys that afternoon. She'd also done something else. She'd printed out every piece of evidence she'd collected and stored copies in a safety deposit box at her bank. Richard Blackwood had no idea that his empire of exploitation was about to crumble. Maya walked into the office at 7:45 a.m., 15 minutes before her supposed meeting with the Morrison client. She wasn't surprised to find that Richard was already there, pacing in his corner office like a caged predator. Maya, he called out when he saw her. Good, you're here. The Morrison team will be here in 15 minutes. Please tell me you have something that will knock their socks off. Maya smiled, but it wasn't the nervous, people-pleasing smile she'd worn for the past 18 months. This was something else entirely, confident, knowing, dangerous. Oh, I have something that's going to knock everyone's socks off, she said. I guarantee it. Richard frowned, something in her tone apparently setting off his predator instincts. What do you mean by that? Before Maya could answer, her phone rang. She glanced at the caller ID and felt her pulse quicken. Excuse me, Mr. Blackwood. I need to take this call. She stepped out of his office and answered the phone. Maya Chen speaking. Ms. Chen, this is Janet Morrison from the Department of Labor. I've reviewed your documentation, and I have some urgent questions. Are you available to speak privately? Maya glanced back at Richard's office, where he was still pacing, completely unaware that his world was about to explode. Yes, Maya said, walking toward the exit. I'm very available. As she pushed open the door to the stairwell, Maya felt the weight of 18 months of oppression lifting from her shoulders. She'd been Richard Blackwood's victim for too long. Now she was about to become his worst nightmare. The Department of Labor moved faster than Maya had dared to hope. Within 72 hours of her initial complaint, investigators were conducting interviews with current and former employees, reviewing company records, and building a case that would make Richard Blackwood's head spin. Maya had returned to work the day after her calls to the various agencies, maintaining her normal routine while secretly coordinating with the investigators. She'd been asked, continue documenting any additional violations, which wasn't difficult since Richard seemed incapable of learning from his mistakes. In fact, he appeared to be doubling down on his abusive behavior. As if sensing some shift in the atmosphere, but not understanding what it was, Richard had become even more demanding, more unreasonable, more prone to sending emails at inappropriate hours. It was Thursday evening when Maya received the call that would change everything. Ms. Chen, this is Janet Morrison from the Department of Labor. We're ready to move forward with enforcement action against your employer. Can you be available tomorrow morning at 9 a.m.? Maya's heart pounded. What kind of enforcement action? We're conducting a surprise inspection of the workplace and we'll be serving your employer with a cease and desist order regarding several serious violations. We'd like you to be present to help us identify specific issues and provide additional testimony if needed. Maya glanced around the office. It was 8 p.m. on a Thursday, and she was one of 15 employees still at their desks, all of them working on Richard's latest urgent project. The irony wasn't lost on her. Richard had created the perfect crime scene for the investigators to walk into. I'll be there, Maya said. That night, Maya slept better than she had in months. She dreamed of her nephew's birthday party, of family dinners, of a life that didn't revolve around Richard Blackwood's endless demands and psychological manipulation. Friday morning arrived crisp and clear. Maya arrived at the office at her normal time, 8:30 a.m., to find Richard already there, pacing in his office while barking orders at his assistant over the phone. At exactly 9 a.m., Maya's phone buzzed with a text from Janet Morrison. We're in the lobby. Maya made her way to the elevator, her heart racing with anticipation and a healthy dose of fear. What she was about to do would change her life forever. There would be no going back to the way things were. The elevator doors opened to reveal three serious-looking individuals in professional attire, led by Janet Morrison, a woman in her 50s with steel gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. Ms. Chen? Janet extended her hand. I'm Janet Morrison. These are my colleagues, David Park from our Enforcement Division and Lisa Rodriguez from the EEOC. We're ready to proceed. Maya shook hands with each of them, noting their confident demeanor and the briefcases they carried. These weren't people who were going to be intimidated by Richard Blackwood's bluster and manipulation. Mr. Blackwood is in his office, Maya said, leading them toward the elevator. I should mention that he's been particularly difficult this week. I think he senses something is wrong, but he doesn't know what. Janet smiled grimly. In our experience, employers who are systematically violating labor laws often develop a paranoid instinct. They know they're doing wrong, even if they've convinced themselves otherwise. As they rode the elevator to the 15th floor, Maya felt a strange sense of calm settling over her. For months, she'd felt powerless, trapped in a system designed to exploit her and her co-workers. Now, for the first time, she had real power. The power of the law, the power of truth, the power of evidence. The elevator doors opened and Maya led the investigators into the office space. Several of her co-workers looked up from their desks, curious about the official-looking visitors. Maya caught Jennifer's eye and gave her a small, meaningful nod. Jennifer's eyes widened slightly, and Maya saw understanding dawn on her face. Mr. Blackwood's office is this way, Maya said, walking toward the corner office where Richard held court. Richard was on the phone when they approached, his voice loud enough to be heard through the glass walls. I don't care what their excuses are, get it done. I need those reports by noon, and I don't want to hear about overtime restrictions or labor law concerns. We have a business to run. Maya knocked on the doorframe. Richard looked up, his face shifting from annoyance to confusion as he took in the group of strangers standing behind Maya. I'll call you back, he said into the phone, hanging up. Maya, what's this about? I thought you were working on the Peterson account. Janet Morrison stepped forward, her credentials already in her hand. Mr. Blackwood, I'm Janet Morrison with the U.S. Department of Labor, Wage and Hour Division. These are my colleagues from the EEOC. We're here to conduct an inspection of your workplace and to serve you with several official notices regarding violations of federal labor laws. The color drained from Richard's face. For a moment, he looked like a fish out of water, his mouth opening and closing without sound. Then his survival instincts kicked in, and his expression shifted to the fake charm he used with clients. Gentlemen, ladies, I'm sure there's been some misunderstanding. Blackwood Industries is a respected firm with an excellent reputation. We've never had any issues with labor law compliance. David Park, The enforcement officer stepped forward with a thick folder. Mr. Blackwood, we have evidence suggesting otherwise. We're here to investigate multiple complaints regarding systematic overtime violations, unpaid wages, retaliation against employees, and discrimination based on gender. Richard's eyes darted to Maya, and she saw the moment when understanding dawned. His face shifted from confusion to anger to something approaching rage. Maya, he said, his voice low and dangerous, I think you should return to your desk. This doesn't concern you. Actually, Mr. Blackwood, Lisa Rodriguez from the EEOC interjected. Ms. Chen is here at our request. She's been very helpful in documenting the violations we're investigating. The tension is building. If you're enjoying this story, hit that like button and let me know in the comments which character you're rooting for. Your support helps me create more incredible stories like this one. Richard Blackwood's mask finally slipped completely. The smooth, manipulative facade he'd maintained for so long cracked like thin ice, revealing the ugly truth beneath. You, he said, pointing at Maya with a trembling finger. You did this. You betrayed your own company, your own team. How could you? Maya stood her ground, feeling stronger than she had in months. I didn't betray anyone, Richard. I protected my coworkers from an employer who was systematically exploiting them. Everything I documented was illegal, and you know it? Illegal? Richard's voice rose to a near shout. We have deadlines. We have clients. We have a business to run. Sometimes that means working extra hours. Sometimes that means making sacrifices. That's how the real world works. Janet Morrison stepped between them, her voice calm but firm. Mr. Blackwood, I'm going to need you to lower your voice and maintain a professional demeanor. What you're describing, mandatory unpaid overtime, retaliation against employees who request time off, discrimination in work assignments, these are serious violations of federal law. Richard turned his attention to the investigators, his salesman's instincts kicking in. Look, I'm sure we can work something out. Every company has areas where they can improve. We're willing to make some adjustments, maybe update some policies. David Park opened his folder and pulled out a thick stack of documents. Mr. Blackwood, we have over 200 pages of evidence documenting systematic violations spanning 18 months. This isn't a matter of minor policy adjustments. This is a pattern of illegal behavior that has affected dozens of employees. He began reading from the top document. Email sent March 15th at 2:47 a.m. demanding immediate response to urgent project. Email sent March 20th at 11:23 p.m. threatening performance review, consequences for employees who don't work weekends. Email sent April 3rd at 1:15 a.m. Enough! Richard slammed his hand on his desk. Those emails were sent to dedicated employees who understand the demands of their positions. No one forced them to work here. Maya felt a surge of anger. No one forced us to work here, but you made it impossible to work anywhere else. You threatened our references, our reputations, our careers. You created a culture of fear and exploitation. That's not true, Richard's voice cracked. I gave you opportunities. I helped you grow. You helped yourself, Maya interrupted. You built your success on the backs of overworked, underpaid employees, and you convinced yourself that your manipulation was mentorship. Lisa Rodriguez stepped forward with her own folder. Mr. Blackwood, we also have evidence of gender discrimination in work assignments and compensation. Our analysis shows that female employees are consistently given more administrative tasks despite equal qualifications, and they're asked to work overtime at nearly twice the rate of male employees. Richard's face was now completely red. That's ridiculous. I don't see gender in the workplace. I see results. The data says otherwise, Lisa replied calmly. She pulled out a chart. This shows work assignments by gender over the past year. Women in your company are asked to work late 73% more often than men with similar positions and experience levels. As the investigators continued presenting their evidence, Maya watched Richard's composure completely disintegrate. He went from denial to anger, to panic, to something approaching desperation. Maya, he said, his voice now pleading, you don't understand what you've done. This will destroy the company. Everyone will lose their jobs. Is that what you want? Maya felt a pang of fear. She'd thought about this possibility, but hearing it stated so directly made her stomach clench. What if she had destroyed the livelihoods of her innocent co-workers? Janet Morrison seemed to sense her concern. Ms. Chen, companies that violate labor laws don't disappear overnight. They're required to come into compliance. Often that means better working conditions for employees, not fewer jobs. Richard latched onto Maya's moment of doubt like a drowning man grabbing a life preserver. Maya, thin? About Jennifer. Think about Tom. Think about all the people who depend on this company for their livelihoods. You're destroying their futures for what? Because you were asked to work a few extra hours? A few extra hours? Maya felt her anger returning, stronger than before. Richard, you had me working 80-hour weeks. You had Jennifer working through her daughter's graduation. You had Tom working Christmas Eve. You convinced Sarah to cancel her wedding to work on a project that you ended up scrapping anyway. That's business, Richard shouted. That's what it takes to succeed in a competitive market? No, Maya said, her voice steady and clear. That's abuse. That's exploitation. That's illegal. David Park cleared his throat. Mr. Blackwood, we're going to need to conduct interviews with your employees and review your payroll records. We're also serving you with a cease and desist order requiring you to immediately stop several specific practices. He handed Richard a thick legal document. You're prohibited from requiring employees to work more than 40 hours per week without overtime compensation. You're prohibited from contacting employees outside of business hours, except in documented emergencies. You're prohibited from retaliating against any employee who has participated in this investigation. Richard took the document with shaking hands. This is impossible. We have deadlines, contracts, obligations to our clients. Then you'll need to hire more employees or adjust your business model, Janet said. What you can't do is continue to violate federal labor laws. As the investigators continued their work, Maya felt a strange mix of emotions. Relief that the nightmare was finally ending. Fear about what would happen next. Guilt about the disruption she'd caused. But underneath it all, a growing sense of pride. She'd done something that many people never had the courage to do. She'd stood up to a bully, not just for herself, but for everyone who had been too afraid or too beaten down to fight back. Richard slumped in his chair, finally seeming to understand that his empire of exploitation was crumbling around him. Maya, he said quietly, I hope you're happy. You've destroyed everything I've built. Maya looked at him, really looked at him, and saw something she'd never seen before. Not a powerful, intimidating boss, but a small, petty man who had built his success on the suffering of others. Richard, she said, I haven't destroyed anything worth saving. I've just exposed what was already rotten. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. The Department of Labor investigation moved with surprising speed, aided by the comprehensive documentation Maya had provided and the cooperation of other employees who had been afraid to speak up before. Maya found herself at the center of a storm that was both exhilarating and terrifying. The investigators conducted dozens of interviews, and Maya was amazed by the stories her coworkers shared. Everyone had their own horror stories about Richard's abuse, but they'd all been too isolated and afraid to realize they weren't alone. Jennifer broke down in tears during her interview, describing how she'd missed her daughter's high school graduation because Richard had threatened to fire her if she didn't work on a weekend project. Tom revealed that he'd been taking anxiety medication for the first time in his life, directly attributable to the stress of Richard's impossible demands. Even more shocking, they discovered that Sarah, the former HR manager who had quit after her nervous breakdown, had actually tried to report Richard's behavior to the company's board of directors, only to be told that Richard's results justified his methods. The investigation revealed a pattern of systematic exploitation that went far beyond what even Maya had documented. Richard had been falsifying time records, pressuring employees to report fewer hours than they'd actually worked, and using a complex system of comp time and unpaid overtime that was designed to avoid paying legally required wages. The financial impact was staggering. The Department of Labor calculated that Richard owed his employees over $800,000 in unpaid wages and overtime, spread across dozens of current and former employees. The EEOC found additional violations that would result in substantial fines and mandatory changes to company policies. But Maya's victory came at a cost. Richard's prediction about the impact on the company proved partially true, though not in the way he'd intended. Faced with massive fines and the cost of bringing the company into legal compliance, the board of directors made a decision that surprised everyone. They fired Richard Blackwood. The announcement came on a Tuesday morning, delivered by the company's president, Eleanor Whitman, who had flown in from the corporate headquarters in Chicago. Maya and her co-workers gathered in the main conference room, uncertain about what to expect. "I want to begin by apologizing," Eleanor said, her voice carrying the weight of genuine remorse. "The board has been made aware of serious violations of labor law and company policy that occurred under Mr. Blackwood's leadership. We take full responsibility for failing to provide adequate oversight and protection for our employees." She paused, looking around the room at the faces of people who had been through months of abuse and exploitation. Effective immediately, Richard Blackwood has been terminated from his position as Director of Operations. We've also initiated a comprehensive review of our policies and procedures to ensure that this never happens again. Maya felt a surge of vindication mixed with concern. "What does this mean for the company? For our jobs?" Eleanor met her eyes directly. "It means that we're committed to making this right. We'll be paying all back wages and overtime as required by law. We're implementing new policies to ensure reasonable working hours and proper compensation. And we're looking for new leadership that shares our commitment to treating employees with dignity and respect." The room buzzed with whispered conversations as people processed this information. Maya felt a hand on her shoulder and turned to see Jennifer, tears in her eyes. "You did it," Jennifer whispered. "You actually did it." But Maya's moment of triumph was complicated by what Eleanor said next. "We're also aware that some of you may have concerns about retaliation or job security. I want to assure you that anyone who participated in the investigation or spoke out about these violations will be protected. However, I also want to be honest about the challenges we face." Maya's stomach tightened. "Here it comes," she thought. "The financial impact of this situation is significant. We're looking at substantial fines, legal fees, and the cost of restructuring our operations. We're committed to keeping everyone employed, but we may need to make some difficult decisions about the size and scope of our operations." As the meeting continued, Maya felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. She'd won her battle against Richard Blackwood, but the war for her co-workers' livelihoods was far from over. After the meeting, Maya was approached by several of her co-workers. Some thanked her for her courage. Others expressed concern about the uncertainty ahead. A few seemed angry, as if she'd created more problems than she'd solved. Tom pulled her aside near the coffee machine. "Maya, I need to ask you something. Do you think we're going to be okay? I mean, really okay?" Maya looked at him, seeing the worry in his eyes. "I don't know, Tom, but I know we're better off than we were. Whatever happens next, it's going to be honest. It's going to be legal. And it's going to be fair." "But what if the company can't survive? What if we all lose our jobs anyway?" Maya had asked herself the same question dozens of times over the past few weeks. "Then we'll find other jobs, and we'll do it with our dignity intact, with our health intact, and with the knowledge that we stood up for ourselves and each other." That afternoon, Maya received a phone call that would change everything once again. "Ms. Chen, this is Eleanor Whitman. I was wondering if we could speak privately. Would you be available to meet with me tomorrow morning?" Maya's pulse quickened. "Of course. Is everything okay?" "Everything's fine. I have a proposition I'd like to discuss with you." As Maya hung up the phone, she couldn't shake the feeling that her story was about to take another unexpected turn. Maya arrived at the office early the next morning, her mind racing with possibilities about what Eleanor Whitman wanted to discuss. She'd barely slept, alternating between excitement and anxiety about the meeting. Eleanor was waiting in the conference room, looking polished and professional in a way that suggested she was used to making important decisions. She gestured for Maya to sit across from her. "Maya, I've been thinking a lot about our conversation yesterday and about the situation our company finds itself in. What you did, documenting the violations, standing up to Mr. Blackwood, coordinating with the authorities. That took tremendous courage and intelligence." Maya felt a flush of pride, but also wariness. "Thank you. I just did what I thought was right." "Exactly. And that's why I wanted to speak with you." Eleanor leaned forward. "Maya, we need new leadership, We need someone who understands both the business and the people who make it work. Someone who won't repeat the mistakes of the past. Maya's heart began to race. What are you saying? I'm offering you Richard Blackwood's position, Director of Operations for the regional office. It comes with a substantial salary increase, management training, and the opportunity to rebuild this office the right way. Maya stared at her, speechless. The offer was beyond anything she'd imagined when Essie first decided to document Richard's abuses. I know it's a lot to consider, Eleanor continued. You'd be managing the same people who were your peers just days ago. You'd be responsible for rebuilding a culture that was deeply damaged. It won't be easy. Why me? Maya asked. I don't have management experience. I don't have an MBA. There must be other candidates who are more qualified on paper. Eleanor smiled. Maya, you have something more valuable than an MBA. You have the trust and respect of your coworkers. They know you fought for them when it mattered. That's worth more than any degree. Maya's mind reeled with the implications. What about the investigation? The legal issues? The investigation will continue, but it's largely complete. The legal issues are being resolved. Richard is facing personal consequences for his actions, but the company is moving forward. We need someone to lead that process. I need time to think about this, Maya said. Of course. Take all the time you need. But Maya, I hope you'll consider it. This is a chance to build something better. Something that proves that businesses can be successful without exploiting their employees. After Eleanor left, Maya sat alone in the conference room, staring out the window at the city below. 6 months ago, she'd been a junior analyst with no power and no voice. Now, she was being offered the chance to run the entire operation. She thought about Richard, probably at home right now, facing the consequences of his actions. She thought about her coworkers, still uncertain about their futures. She thought about her family, who had watched her struggle and supported her through the darkest months of her career. Her phone buzzed with a text from her sister Emma. Heard about your boss getting fired. Are you okay? Maya smiled and typed back, better than okay. I think I'm about to be great. But first, she had some people to talk to. Maya spent the rest of the day having conversations with her coworkers, not about Eleanor's offer, but about their hopes and concerns for the future. She listened to Jennifer talk about wanting to use her accounting skills more strategically. She heard Tom describe his ideas for more efficient marketing processes. She saw the spark of hope in people's eyes when they talked about what the company could become. By the end of the day, Maya had made her decision. She called Eleanor that evening. I accept your offer, but I have some conditions. I'm listening. First, I want to implement a formal employee feedback system. No more decisions made in isolation. Everyone gets a voice in how this company operates. Agreed? Second, I want to establish clear boundaries around work-life balance. No emails after 6 p.m. unless it's a genuine emergency. No mandatory overtime without proper compensation. Flexible schedules for people who need them. Absolutely. Third, I want to create a professional development program. If we're asking people to grow with the company, we need to invest in their growth. Eleanor was quiet for a moment. Maya, you realize you're describing a complete transformation of how this company operates? Yes? Is that a problem? Not at all. It's exactly what we need. 3 months into her new role as Director of Operations, Maya stood in the same office where Richard Blackwood had once paced like a caged predator. The space felt completely different now, brighter, more open, more collaborative. She'd removed the intimidating executive furniture and replaced it with a simple desk and comfortable chairs for meetings. The changes at Blackwood Industries had been dramatic and swift. The company had not only survived the legal challenges and financial penalties, but had emerged stronger and more profitable than ever. It turned out that when employees weren't burned out, demoralized, and constantly anxious, they were remarkably productive. Maya had implemented every reform she'd promised and more. The employee feedback system had generated dozens of improvements to workplace policies and procedures. The work-life balance initiatives had reduced turnover by 60% and sick days by 40%. The professional development program had helped 3 employees earn promotions and certifications that made them more valuable to the company. But perhaps the most significant change was cultural. The atmosphere of fear and exploitation that had defined Richard's tenure had been replaced by something Maya had never experienced in a workplace: genuine collaboration and mutual respect. She was reviewing the quarterly performance reports when Jennifer knocked on her doorframe. "Maya, do you have a minute? I wanted to show you something." Jennifer entered carrying a folder thick with documents. "Remember that process improvement project we discussed last month? I think I found a way to streamline our client onboarding that could save us about 15 hours per new account." Maya smiled. This was the Jennifer she'd always known was there, intelligent, creative, and passionate about her work. Under Richard's leadership, Jennifer had been relegated to basic data entry and filing. Now she was solving complex operational challenges and loving every minute of it. "This looks excellent," Maya said, reviewing Jennifer's proposal. "Have you discussed it with the client services team?" "That's the best part. Tom and I collaborated on this. He identified the marketing integration opportunities while I focused on the accounting workflow. We think this could improve client satisfaction scores, too." As Jennifer left, Maya reflected on how much her relationship with her former peers had evolved. There had been some awkward moments in the beginning. People weren't sure how to relate to someone who had been their colleague and was now their boss. But Maya had worked hard to maintain open communication and transparency, and gradually, people had learned to trust her leadership. Not everyone had been happy with the changes. 2 employees had quit in the first month, complaining that the new policies were too restrictive and that they preferred the flexibility of Richard's management style. Maya had been sorry to see them go, but she understood that some people had become accustomed to dysfunction and found healthy boundaries uncomfortable. Her phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. The caller ID showed Eleanor Whitman's name. "Maya, I hope I'm not interrupting anything important." "Not at all. What can I do for you?" "I wanted to give you a heads up about something. Richard Blackwood has been making some noise about the company, trying to damage our reputation with clients and potential employees. He's been spreading the story that he was unfairly targeted and that the company is now failing under inexperienced leadership." Maya felt a familiar knot form in her stomach. "Is it working?" Eleanor chuckled. "Actually, it's having the opposite effect. Word has gotten around about what really happened here, and other companies are reaching out to learn about our transformation. We're getting more business inquiries than we can handle, and we've had 3 recruitment firms contact us asking if we're hiring because people want to work for a company that actually treats its employees well." Maya felt relief wash over her. "That's incredible." "There's more. The Department of Labor is using your case as a model for how effective documentation and employee advocacy can create positive change. They're inviting you to speak at a conference about workplace rights next month." After hanging up with Eleanor, Maya walked out into the main office space. It was 5:30 p.m., and something that would have been impossible under Richard's leadership was happening. People were leaving. On time. Without guilt. Without fear. Tom waved goodbye as he headed to the elevator. "See you tomorrow, Maya. I'm coaching my daughter's soccer practice tonight." Jennifer was packing up her desk. "Great meeting today. I'm excited to implement those changes next week. But right now, I'm going to dinner with my family." Maya smiled, remembering all the family dinners she'd missed during Richard's reign of terror. Now, she made it to her own family dinners regularly, and the difference in her relationships with her mother, sister, and nephew had been profound. 6 months after taking over as director of operations, Maya received a phone call that brought her story full circle. "Ms. Chen, this is Detective Martinez with the White Collar Crime Division. I wanted to let you know that Richard Blackwood has been charged with multiple felonies related to wage theft and fraud. Your documentation was instrumental in building the case." Maya had known this was possible, but hearing it stated so directly still came as a shock. What kind of charges? Systematic wage theft, falsifying business records, and tax evasion. Apparently, he wasn't just stealing from employees. He was hiding income from the IRS to avoid paying corporate taxes. Your evidence helped us uncover a pattern of fraud that goes back several years. After the call, Maya sat quietly in her office, processing the news. Richard Blackwood, the man who had made her life miserable for 18 months, who had stolen time, money, and dignity from dozens of employees, was finally facing real consequences for his actions. But what struck her most wasn't satisfaction or revenge. It was gratitude. Gratitude that she'd had the courage to document his abuses. Gratitude that she'd found the strength to stand up to him. Gratitude that her actions had protected other people from experiencing what she had endured. Her reflection was interrupted by a knock on her door. A young woman Maya didn't recognize stood in the doorway, looking nervous and uncertain. "Ms. Chen, I'm Sarah Martinez, the new junior analyst. I just wanted to introduce myself and, well, to thank you." Maya invited her in. "Thank me? For what?" Sarah sat down, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "I heard about what happened here before you became director, about how you stood up to the previous management and helped change everything. I just wanted you to know that stories like yours are why I believed I could work in corporate America without compromising my values." Maya felt a warmth spread through her chest. "Sarah, you don't need to thank me for that. You just need to promise me that if you ever encounter the kind of treatment I experienced, you'll speak up, you'll document it, you'll fight back." "I will," Sarah said with conviction. "But honestly, from everything I've seen so far, I don't think I'll need to. This place feels different from other companies I've worked for. People seem happy." After Sarah left, Maya returned to her work, but her mind kept drifting to the conversation. She thought about the ripple effects of her decision to fight back against Richard's abuse. Not just the changes at her own company, but the message it had sent to other employees, other companies, other would-be bullies who thought they could exploit workers without consequences. Her computer chimed with an email notification. The sender made her smile. It was from Janet Morrison at the Department of Labor. "Maya, I wanted to update you on some developments in workplace enforcement that were directly inspired by your case. Based on the documentation techniques you used and the successful outcome, we've developed new guidelines for employees who want to report labor violations. We're also working with advocacy groups to create educational materials about workers' rights. Your courage has helped more people than you'll ever know." Maya leaned back in her chair, looking out the window at the city beyond. Somewhere out there, other employees were working late against their will, being exploited by bosses who thought they were untouchable, feeling trapped and powerless just as she had once felt. But now, those employees had something they hadn't had before: a roadmap, a proof of concept, evidence that one person, armed with documentation and determination, could take on a system of exploitation and win. 2 weeks after learning about Richard's criminal charges, Maya received an unexpected visitor at her office. A tall, impeccably dressed man in his 50s stood in her doorway, briefcase in hand, and an expression that immediately put her on guard. "Ms. Chen? I'm Robert Fitzgerald, attorney for Richard Blackwood. I wonder if we might have a word." Maya's stomach tightened, but she gestured to the chair across from her desk. "Of course, though I should mention that anything regarding the investigation should probably go through our legal department." Fitzgerald smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Actually, I'm here on a different matter. My client is considering filing a defamation lawsuit against you personally, as well as wrongful termination claims against the company. I thought we might discuss this privately before things escalate." Maya felt her pulse quicken, but she kept her voice steady. "I'm not sure what there is to discuss. Everything I reported was documented and factual." "That's where you're wrong, Ms. Chen." Fitzgerald opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. "My client has evidence that you fabricated emails, manipulated timestamps, and conspired with other employees to create false evidence against him." Maya stared at him, genuinely shocked. "That's absolutely untrue, and you know it. The Department of Labor verified all of my documentation independently." "Government investigators make mistakes," Fitzgerald said smoothly. "And my client has been analyzing your so-called evidence. There are discrepancies, inconsistencies, patterns that suggest deliberate manipulation." "Such as?" Fitzgerald pulled out a printed email. "This email, supposedly sent by my client at 2:47 a.m. on March 15th. My client has phone records proving he was asleep at that time. and his home security system shows no activity indicating he was awake. Maya looked at the email, one of the dozens she'd forwarded to the investigators. It was definitely one of Richard's late-night demands, but seeing it presented as evidence of her dishonesty made her question herself for a moment. Mr. Fitzgerald, that email was forwarded directly from my work account to the investigators. I didn't alter anything. Perhaps not consciously, but email forwarding can sometimes change metadata. Timestamps can be affected by server issues. What looks like proof to you might be a technical glitch to a jury. Maya felt a chill run down her spine. She'd been so confident in her documentation, but what if there were technical issues she hadn't considered? What if Richard's expensive lawyer could create enough doubt to discredit her case? "What does your client want?" she asked. "A public apology, a retraction of your statements to the investigators, and your resignation from the company with an agreement not to work in the consulting industry for 5 years." Maya stared at him in disbelief. "You're asking me to destroy my career and admit to lies I didn't tell? I'm asking you to consider the alternative. A lengthy legal battle that will cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees, destroy your reputation, and likely result in criminal charges for filing false reports with federal agencies." After Fitzgerald left, Maya sat alone in her office, her hands shaking. Everything she'd built, everything she'd fought for could be destroyed by a legal challenge she couldn't afford to fight. She picked up her phone and called the one person she trusted most. "Eleanor, I need to talk to you. We have a problem." An hour later, Maya sat in Eleanor's hotel suite, recounting her conversation with Fitzgerald. Eleanor listened without interruption, her expression growing darker with each detail. "Maya, this is exactly what we expected might happen. Richard is facing serious criminal charges and civil liability. His only hope is to discredit the evidence against him. But what if he's right? What if there are technical issues with the emails? What if a jury believes his version?" Eleanor leaned forward. "Maya, I've seen the original investigation files. The Department of Labor didn't just rely on your emails. They conducted independent interviews with dozens of employees. They reviewed company financial records. They found patterns of violation that go far beyond what you documented. But if he can discredit my evidence, he can't, because we're not going to let him." Eleanor pulled out her own phone. "I'm calling our legal team. We're going to fight this, and we're going to win." Over the next several days, Maya found herself at the center of a legal storm that made her original battle with Richard seem simple by comparison. Richard's lawyer had filed motions in multiple courts, launched a media campaign questioning Maya's credibility, and even arranged for private investigators to interview her former colleagues and neighbors. The stress was overwhelming. Maya found herself unable to sleep, constantly checking her phone for new developments, jumping at every unexpected noise. The confident, empowered woman she'd become was slowly being replaced by the anxious, frightened employee she'd once been. It was Jennifer who helped her regain perspective. "Maya, do you remember what you told me when I was afraid to speak to the investigators?" Jennifer asked during a coffee break. "You said that telling the truth is always the right choice, even when it's difficult." "This is different, Jen. Richard has resources I don't have. He can afford to drag this out for years. But he's also desperate. People who are winning don't usually resort to intimidation tactics and legal threats. They accept their consequences and move on." Jennifer was right, but it didn't make the pressure any easier to bear. Maya's family was worried about her, her co-workers were anxious about the company's future, and every day brought new legal complications. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Maya was working late one evening, reviewing legal documents, when her phone rang. The caller ID showed a number she didn't recognize. "Ms. Chen, this is Detective Martinez. I have some information I think you'll find interesting." "What kind of information?" "We've been investigating Mr. Blackwood's financial records as part of the criminal case, and we've discovered something significant. Those emails he claims you fabricated? We found the originals on his personal laptop, complete with metadata that proves they were sent exactly when you said they were." Maya felt a wave of relief so intense it nearly made her dizzy. "How did you find them?" "Mr. Blackwood made a crucial mistake. When he hired his attorney, he turned over what he claimed were all of his electronic communications. But he forgot about an automatic backup system on his home computer. Every email he ever sent was preserved, including the ones he tried to delete. "What does this mean for his lawsuit against me?" Detective Martinez chuckled. "Ms. Chen, I think you'll find that lawsuit disappearing very quickly. When someone files false claims in federal court while under criminal investigation, it tends to make prosecutors very interested in additional charges." Within days of Detective Martinez's discovery, the story exploded into national news. Richard Blackwood's attempt to intimidate Maya had backfired spectacularly, and the media seized on the narrative of a powerful executive trying to destroy the whistleblower who had exposed his crimes. Maya found herself thrust into the spotlight in a way she'd never anticipated. Reporters called constantly, requesting interviews. Television producers wanted her to appear on talk shows. Social media buzzed with hashtags like #Maya Chen and #Whistleblower Justice. The attention was overwhelming, but it also brought unexpected support. Maya received hundreds of emails from employees around the country who shared their own stories of workplace abuse. Labor attorneys offered to represent her pro bono. Advocacy groups invited her to speak at conferences and rallies. Most importantly, the media attention put additional pressure on prosecutors to pursue Richard's case aggressively. Public sentiment had turned decisively against him, and his reputation in the business community was completely destroyed. But the media storm also brought new challenges. Maya's personal life was dissected by reporters and internet commentators. Her family was harassed by photographers. Critics questioned her motives, suggesting she was seeking fame or financial gain rather than justice. The lowest point came when a tabloid published a story claiming that Maya had fabricated her credentials and was actually an unqualified employee who had manipulated the situation for personal advancement. Though the story was quickly debunked, it hurt to see her achievements minimized and her character attacked. Maya was seriously considering stepping back from public attention when she received a call that changed her perspective. "Ms. Chen, this is Sarah Williams. I'm a paralegal at a law firm in Seattle, and I wanted to thank you." "Thank me for what?" "I've been dealing with sexual harassment and wage theft at my firm for 2 years. I was afraid to report it because I thought I'd lose my job and no one would believe me. But watching your story, seeing how you documented everything and fought back successfully, gave me the courage to speak up." Sarah's voice became emotional. "I filed a complaint with the EEOC last week. I used your documentation techniques, and I have evidence going back 18 months. My attorney says it's one of the strongest cases she's ever seen." "That's wonderful, Sarah. How can I help?" "You already have, just by showing that it's possible to win. That's more valuable than you know." After hanging up, Maya realized that the media attention, despite its drawbacks, was serving a larger purpose. Her story was inspiring other employees to fight back against abuse, creating a ripple effect that extended far beyond her own situation. She decided to embrace the platform she'd been given, using it to educate others about their rights and the tools available to combat workplace exploitation. Richard Blackwood's criminal trial began 6 months after his termination, and Maya found herself as the prosecution's star witness. The courtroom was packed with reporters, former employees, and advocates who had followed the case from the beginning. Richard looked different from the intimidating executive Maya remembered. Months of legal battles and media scrutiny had taken their toll. He appeared smaller, older, defeated before the trial even began. His attorney, Robert Fitzgerald, had tried multiple legal maneuvers to exclude Maya's testimony and evidence, but the prosecution's case was too strong. The combination of Maya's documentation, corroborating witness testimony, and the electronic evidence found on Richard's personal computer created an overwhelming case. Maya's testimony lasted 2 full days. She walked the jury through her documentation process, explained the impact of Richard's behavior on employees, and calmly refuted every attempt by the defense to discredit her evidence. The most powerful moment came when prosecutor Amanda Rodriguez asked Maya to read one of Richard's 3 a.m. emails aloud. "Maya, I've been thinking about the Morrison account. I want you to come in early tomorrow and present your findings to the client at 8 a.m. Prepare for a hostile audience. Morrison's team is skeptical of our capabilities, and I'm counting on you to change their minds. Don't disappoint me." Maya looked up from the document. This email was sent at 3:17 a.m. on a Tuesday night. I was expected to read it, prepare a presentation, and deliver it to a client 5 hours later, with no additional compensation for the extra work or the impossible timeline. And how did receiving emails like this at all hours of the night affect you personally? Maya's voice was steady but filled with emotion. It made me feel like I had no life outside of work, like I was always on call, always expected to sacrifice my health, my relationships, my well-being for the company. It created a constant state of anxiety and exhaustion that affected every aspect of my life. The defense's cross-examination was aggressive but ineffective. Fitzgerald tried to portray Maya as a disgruntled employee seeking revenge, but her calm professionalism and the overwhelming evidence made his arguments fall flat. Other witnesses followed, each adding to the picture of systematic abuse and exploitation. Jennifer testified about missing her daughter's graduation. Tom described his anxiety medication and sleepless nights. Former employee after former employee shared their stories of Richard's impossible demands and retaliatory behavior. The most damaging testimony came from Richard's own former assistant, Patricia Morgan, who had been granted immunity in exchange for her cooperation. Mr. Blackwood instructed me to alter time records, Patricia testified. He told me to reduce the hours that employees reported so the company wouldn't have to pay overtime. He said it was creative accounting and that all successful companies did it. Did you keep records of these instructions? Patricia nodded. I was uncomfortable with what he was asking me to do, so I kept copies of his emails and recorded some of our conversations. I was afraid I might need to protect myself someday. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning with guilty verdicts on all counts: wage theft, fraud, falsifying business records, and tax evasion. Richard Blackwood was sentenced to 3 years in federal prison and ordered to pay over $2 million in restitution to affected employees. As Maya left the courthouse, she was surrounded by reporters and supporters. The questions came rapid fire. How do you feel about the verdict? What's next for you? Do you have a message for other employees facing similar situations? Maya stopped on the courthouse steps and looked out at the crowd of cameras and faces. Many of the people present were employees who had found the courage to speak up because of her example. This verdict isn't just about Richard Blackwood, she said. It's about every employee who has been told that exploitation is normal, that abuse is just part of business, that they have no power to fight back. Today proves that's not true. When we document violations, when we support each other, when we refuse to accept illegal treatment, we can win. 1 year after Richard's conviction, Maya stood in the lobby of the newly renamed Chen Industries, formerly Blackwood Industries. The board of directors had offered to rename the company in her honor, recognizing her role in transforming it from a place of exploitation into a model of ethical business practices. The changes had been dramatic and far-reaching. The company now employed twice as many people as it had under Richard's leadership, but productivity and profitability had increased rather than decreased. It turned out that when employees weren't exhausted, demoralized, and constantly anxious, they were remarkably creative and efficient. Maya had implemented innovative policies that other companies were now studying and copying. Flexible work schedules allowed employees to balance their professional and personal lives. A profit-sharing program gave everyone a stake in the company's success. Regular employee surveys ensured that management stayed connected to the needs and concerns of the workforce. But perhaps the most significant change was the company's new mission statement, which Maya had written herself. We believe that business success and employee well-being are not opposing forces, but complementary goals that strengthen each other. The transformation hadn't been without challenges. Some clients had initially been skeptical of the company's new policies, worried that employee-friendly practices would compromise service quality. But as results spoke for themselves, faster project completion, higher client satisfaction scores, lower employee turnover, even the skeptics became believers. Maya's office was decorated with awards and recognition letters from various organizations, but the items she treasured most were thank you notes from employees whose lives had been changed by the transformation. One note, from Jennifer, read, "Maya, because of the changes you've made, I was able to attend my daughter's college graduation last month. It was the first major family event I hadn't missed in years. Thank you for giving me my life back." Another, from Tom, said, "The anxiety medication I was taking under the old management? I haven't needed it in 8 months. I love coming to work now, and I never thought I'd be able to say that about any job." Maya's intercom buzzed, interrupting her reflection. "Ms. Chen, there's a reporter here from Business W. Week. She's doing a feature story on ethical management practices." "Send her in," Maya said, straightening her jacket. She'd become accustomed to media attention, using every interview as an opportunity to promote the principles of fair and legal employment practices. The reporter, a woman in her 30s with an eager expression, entered with a photographer in tow. "Ms. Chen, thank you for taking the time to speak with us. I'm Jessica Park from Business Week. We're doing a cover story on companies that have successfully balanced profitability with employee welfare, and your company is our lead example." As they settled into chairs around Maya's conference table, Jessica pulled out a digital recorder. "Let's start with the obvious question. 2 years ago, you were a mid-level employee with no management experience. Now you're running one of the most successful consulting firms in the region. How did that transformation happen?" Maya smiled, thinking about how to condense her complex journey into a soundbite. "It happened because I refused to accept that employee exploitation was normal or necessary. When you treat people with dignity and respect, when you pay them fairly and give them reasonable working conditions, they perform at their highest level." Richard Blackwood never understood that. He thought fear and intimidation were motivational tools. In reality, they were destroying the company's most valuable resource, its people. "Your company's productivity has increased by 40% since you took over, despite implementing policies that many would consider employee-friendly to the point of being costly. How do you explain that?" "It's simple," Maya replied. "When employees aren't exhausted from working 80-hour weeks, they make better decisions. When they're not constantly anxious about unreasonable demands, they're more creative. When they know their employer respects their time and their lives, they're more committed to the company's success." She gestured toward the window overlooking the office space. "Look out there. It's 5:30 p.m. on a Friday, and most of our employees have gone home to spend time with their families. Under the previous management, this office would have been full of people working mandatory overtime, stressed and resentful. Which scenario do you think produces better work?" The interview continued for an hour, covering everything from specific policy changes to the broader implications of Maya's approach for American business culture. As it concluded, Jessica asked the question that Maya had been expecting. "Ms. Chen, there are critics who argue that your approach is unrealistic, that it only works because you're in a specialized industry with high-value clients. What would you say to executives in other industries who claim they can't afford to treat employees the way you do?" Maya had heard this argument countless times, and her response was always the same. "Those executives are making a false choice. They're assuming that they have to choose between profitability and employee welfare. But our experience proves that's not true. The costs of high turnover, low morale, and constant crisis management far exceed the costs of fair wages and reasonable working conditions." She leaned forward, her voice becoming more passionate. "More importantly, it's the law. The labor protections that Richard Blackwood violated aren't suggestions. They're legal requirements. Companies that ignore them aren't just being unethical, they're committing crimes. And as Richard learned, there are consequences for those crimes." Maya's speech had been her most powerful yet, delivered to an audience that included members of Congress, labor officials, and employee advocates from around the world. The response had been overwhelming: standing ovations, emotional conversations, and commitments to legislative changes that could protect millions of workers. But the real validation came from the personal stories people shared with her afterward. A young teacher from Texas told her about using Maya's documentation techniques to expose wage theft at her school district, resulting in $500,000 in back pay for affected teachers. A warehouse worker from Ohio described how Maya's story had inspired him to report safety violations that led to federal intervention and life-saving changes to working conditions. A group of restaurant workers from California explained how they'd used Maya's playbook to expose systematic tip theft and discrimination, resulting in criminal charges against their former manager and policy changes across an entire restaurant chain. Each story reinforced Maya's belief that individual courage could create ripple effects that extended far beyond any single workplace or situation. After the conference, Maya returned to her hotel room to find a message waiting for her. A call from someone she hadn't spoken to in over a year. Maya, this is Richard Blackwood. Her stomach clenched as she heard his voice, though he sounded different than she remembered. Smaller, defeated, humbled. I'm calling from federal prison, and I know you have no reason to take my call or listen to what I have to say. But I needed to apologize. Maya sat down heavily on the hotel bed, her mind racing. I've had 2 years to think about what I did to you, to everyone who worked for me. I've had time to understand the damage I caused, the lives I hurt, the fear and anxiety I created. There's no excuse for it. There's no justification. I was wrong, completely and absolutely wrong. His voice broke slightly. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know that I understand now what you were fighting against. I understand why you had to stop me. And I'm grateful that you had the courage to do what I couldn't. Put employees' welfare ahead of short-term profits. Maya listened in silence, processing this unexpected development. I've been working with prison counselors and talking to other inmates who are here for white-collar crimes. Many of them have stories similar to mine. Executives who convinced themselves that exploiting workers was just good business. We were wrong. We caused real harm to real people, and we deserved the consequences we received. Richard paused, and Maya could hear the emotion in his voice. I know I can't undo the damage I caused, but I want you to know that your fight, your victory, it didn't just stop me, it's changed me. I'm a different person than I was when you worked for me, and that's because you forced me to confront the truth about what I had become. After Richard hung up, Maya sat in her hotel room for a long time, processing the conversation. She felt no satisfaction in his suffering, but she did feel a sense of closure that she hadn't expected. The next morning, Maya flew home to find that her story had taken another unexpected turn. A major publisher had reached out about her book proposal, offering a 7-figure advance for a comprehensive guide to workplace advocacy. More significantly, she'd received a call from the White House. The president's labor policy team wanted to consult with her on proposed legislation that would strengthen worker protections and make it easier for employees to report violations without fear of retaliation. But the call that meant the most came from her nephew, David, now a senior in high school. Aunt Maya, I've been thinking about college majors and I want to study labor law. I want to help people the way you did. You showed me that one person can make a real difference. As Maya sat in her office at Chen Industries, surrounded by awards and recognition letters, but more importantly surrounded by the sounds of a healthy, thriving workplace, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. 3 years ago, she'd been a frightened, overworked employee with no voice and no power. Today, she was the CEO of a successful company, a nationally recognized advocate for worker rights, and the author of legislation that could protect millions of employees from the abuse she'd experienced. But the most important change wasn't in her title or her public recognition. It was in the knowledge that she'd broken a cycle of exploitation that could have continued indefinitely. Every employee who felt safe reporting violations, every manager who thought twice before sending a 3 a.m. email, every company that implemented fair labor practices because they'd heard her story. These were the real measures of her success. Her computer chimed with an email notification. It was from a recent college graduate named Michael Rodriguez, who had just started his first job at a consulting firm. Ms. Chen, I wanted to thank you for your book and your advocacy. Because of your work, I knew what red flags to look for when I was interviewing for jobs. I turned down an offer from a company that showed several warning signs you described, and instead took a position with a firm that has excellent labor practices. I would never have known to look for these things without your guidance. Maya smiled as she typed her response. Michael, that's exactly why I do this work. Prevention is always better than having to fight back after the damage is done. Congratulations on making a smart choice, and remember, if you ever encounter problems, document everything and don't be afraid to speak up. As she finished the email, Maya's assistant knocked on her door. Ms. Chen, there's a reporter from 60 Minutes here. They want to do a follow-up story on Richard Blackwood's case and the changes in workplace advocacy since your victory. Maya straightened her jacket and checked her appearance in the mirror. 3 years ago, the thought of speaking to national media would have terrified her. Now, it was just another opportunity to spread the message that had become her life's work. Every employee deserves dignity, respect, and the protection of the law. "Send them in," she said. "I've got a story to tell." As the camera crew set up their equipment, Maya looked out the window at the bustling office below. Jennifer was leading a team meeting, her confidence and expertise on full display. Tom was presenting a marketing strategy to clients, his creativity unleashed now that he wasn't constantly stressed and anxious. New employees were being trained in company policies that prioritized both excellence and work-life balance. This was what victory looked like. Not just the defeat of a bad boss, but the creation of something better in its place. A workplace where people could thrive professionally without sacrificing their health, their relationships, or their dignity. The reporter approached with her microphone, and Maya turned to face the camera. "Ms. Chen, it's been 3 years since you first reported Richard Blackwood's labor violations. Looking back, do you have any regrets about the path you chose?" Maya considered the question seriously. She thought about the stress of the investigation, the legal battles, the media scrutiny, the personal attacks she'd endured. Then she thought about the hundreds of employees who had reached out to thank her, the legislative changes her case had inspired, the companies that had reformed their practices, and the young people like her nephew who were entering the workforce with knowledge and tools to protect themselves. "No regrets," she said firmly. "Fighting back against workplace abuse was the scariest thing I've ever done, but it was also the most important. When you see injustice and you have the power to stop it, you have a responsibility to act, not just for yourself, but for everyone who comes after you." What would you say to employees who are currently facing similar situations but are afraid to speak up? Maya looked directly into the camera, knowing that somewhere out there, frightened and overworked employees were watching, wondering if they had the courage to fight back. "I would say that you're not alone. You're not powerless, and you don't have to accept illegal treatment. Document everything. Know your rights. Reach out for help. And remember that when you stand up for yourself, you're standing up for every employee who comes after you." She paused, thinking about Richard Blackwood in his prison cell, finally understanding the damage he'd caused. Change is possible. Justice is possible, but only if we're brave enough to demand it. As the interview concluded and the camera crew packed up their equipment, Maya felt the same sense of purpose that had driven her 3 years ago when she'd made her first call to the Department of Labor. The fight wasn't over. It might never be completely over. But she'd proven that individual courage could create systemic change. Her phone buzzed with a text from her sister Emma, now a practicing physician. "Saw the interview. Mom and I are so proud of you. Dinner Sunday at 6? Maya smiled and typed back, "Wouldn't miss it. Family dinners are sacred time." As she gathered her things to leave the office at 5:30 p.m., like a normal person with a normal life, Maya reflected on the most important lesson she'd learned. Sometimes the scariest thing you can do is also the most necessary thing you can do. Richard Blackwood had said overtime was mandatory. Maya had sent the labor board his 3 a.m. emails and shut him down. And in doing so, she'd discovered something more powerful than any corporate hierarchy: the unstoppable force of one person who refuses to be silently exploited. The good guys had won. Justice had been served. And Maya Chen was finally, completely, triumphantly free. But more than that, she'd created a world where fewer people would need to fight the battle she'd fought, and those who did would have the tools and support they needed to win. That was the real victory. Not just personal justice, but systemic change that would protect countless others. The boss had been defeated, but more importantly, the culture that enabled bosses like him was being transformed. Maya walked out of her office into the evening air, heading home to her family and her life. The life she'd fought so hard to reclaim and protect. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to help others, new chances to build a better world. But tonight, she was just Maya Chen, going home to dinner with her family. The people who had supported her through the darkest days of her battle and celebrated with her through the brightest moments of her victory. As she walked to her car, Maya's phone buzzed one final time. A text from an unknown number. "Ms. Chen, I'm a nurse in Michigan. My hospital is forcing us to work double shifts without overtime pay. After reading your story, I started documenting everything. Thank you for showing me it's possible to fight back and win. Maya smiled as she typed her response. You're not alone. Document everything. Know your rights, and never be afraid to stand up for what's right. If you need help, reach out. We're all in this together. She put her phone away and started her car, thinking about all the battles still being fought, all the employees who were just beginning to find their courage, all the changes yet to come. The war against workplace exploitation was far from over, but Maya had proven that individual courage could spark systemic change. She'd shown that documentation and determination could defeat even the most powerful bullies. Most importantly, she'd demonstrated that justice was possible when people refused to accept injustice. Richard Blackwood had said overtime was mandatory. Maya Chen had sent the labor board his 3 a.m. emails and shut him down. In doing so, she'd not only saved herself and her co-workers, she'd created a blueprint for victory that would help countless others win their own battles for dignity and justice. The boss had been defeated, the company had been transformed, the laws had been strengthened, and Maya Chen had discovered the most powerful truth of all. One person with courage, evidence, and determination can change the world. As she drove home through the city lights, Maya felt the deep satisfaction that comes from a job well done, a battle well fought, and a victory that would echo through the lives of countless others. The good guys had won. Justice had been served, and Maya Chen was finally, completely, triumphantly free. The end. What did you think of this thrilling journey? Share your favorite moment in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss our latest tales. What kind of story would you like to hear next?